civil war in Syria and fears of a nuclear-armed Iran were both top concerns for world leaders meeting at the United Nations 67th Annual General Assembly in New York. US President Barack Obama spoke on opening day, saying the US will do what it must to keep Iran from developing nuclear weapons. Today, all eyes will be on the UN as Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad takes the podium. And on Thursday, a senior US official says the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council plus Germany will meet on the sidelines to talk about next steps for Iran.
It's the day the UN must focus on the Middle East and the toughest issues which so often divide the world body. As leader follows leader to the podium of the General Assembly, yesterday that procession included the presidents of the United States, France, Argentina and South Africa, among many others. Today it will be the turn of Egypt's President Morsi to make his debut appearance, representing a country transformed by the Arab Spring. His stance on the Israeli-Palestinian issue will be closely analysed. Jordan's king has already made his frustrations at the lack of progress very clear.
Violence must end immediately, and a transition must begin now. There is no alternative to a political solution that will end the bloodshed, restore security and stability, and preserve the territorial integrity of Syria.
It will be the speech of Iran's President Ahmadinejad, which is certain to provoke a walkout by some countries, but possibly admiration from others who take his side.
U.S. President Barack Obama challenged world leaders to stand up against violence against Americans. He said his government had nothing to do with a film made in the U.S. that ridicules the Prophet Muhammad.
Now, I have made it clear that the United States government had nothing to do with this video. It is an insult not only to Muslims, but to America as well, that I've witnessed after nearly 4 years as president, that I remain ever hopeful about the world that we live in. The war in Iraq is over. American troops have come home. Al-Qaeda has been weakened, and Osama bin Laden is no more.
The centerpiece of the president's visit to New York, his speech to the UN General Assembly, focusing on the unrest in Libya and the Middle East, and at times emotional.
The attacks on the civilians in Benghazi were attacks on America. There should be no doubt that we will be relentless in tracking down the killers and bringing them to justice. And on this, we must agree. There is no speech that justifies mindless violence.
Mr. Obama also appeared to draw a real line in the sand on Iran's effort to build nuclear weapons.
So let me be clear. America wants to resolve this issue through diplomacy, and we believe that there is still time and space to do so. But that time is not unlimited. And make no mistake, a nuclear-armed Iran is not a challenge that can be contained.
In his speech to the 193-nation assembly, the Emir of Qatar said it was time for Arab nations to intervene militarily in Syria. Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani told delegates all the options tried so far have been in vain. The Security Council has failed to reach an effective position, he said, and so I think it would be better for the Arab countries themselves to get involved, in line with their national, humanitarian and military responsibilities. Meanwhile, at a meeting on the sidelines, Egypt's new president called for genuine cooperation between cultures. But in the wake of violent protests in the Muslim world over Western depictions of the Prophet Muhammad, Mohamed Morsi called for caution.
The crisis is no longer limited to Syria. It is a regional calamity with global ramifications. This is a serious and growing threat to international peace and security.
But there's still no sign of action from the UN Security Council, where Russia and China have refused to agree to sanctions. A sentiment echoed by the French president, who reiterated that France would recognise a new transitional government in Syria.
I'm asking that the United Nations, starting now, gives the Syrian people all the support and assistance that they are requesting, and in particular, that liberated areas be protected.
While the diplomatic paralysis continues, the fighting is intensifying in towns and cities across Syria. Opposition activists now estimate that some 30,000 people have been killed in 18 months of conflict.
On the opening day of the General Assembly, the diplomatic discourse at the UN reflected the anger of the Muslim street. A recent amateurish video posted on the internet, seen as an attack on the Prophet Muhammad, has led not only to violent protests, but also to renewed calls for international anti-blasphemy laws.
The international community must not become silent observer and should criminalize such acts that destroy the peace of the world.
I call for an international instrument to effectively prevent incitement to hostility or violence based on religions or beliefs.
Debate over whether or not to outlaw the defamation of religion seemed to be settled last year when all UN member states agreed on a resolution that shifted the focus from protecting beliefs to protecting believers.